Hi, Catherine. Thanks for being here. So I called the webinar. I asked Catherine to come and speak to my clients and folks in my network about sales. I deal with sales in almost all of our client engagements, being in B2B marketing, especially in enterprise sales and technology consulting engagements. And Catherine has just been a wealth of information for us at PaperSword. She helped us almost double our quarterly revenue because we went through her workshop, myself and another person at PaperSword. And every time I talk to her, I learn something new. And she's got this great new book out called How Good Humans Sell. And I've read it and I love it. And it has a lot of the practices and a lot of the techniques that you taught in the workshop. But I want to talk to you a little bit more about how we can use some of that How Good Humans Sell and align it to how we market. And there are a lot of marketing folks on the webinar today. Mm-hmm. And so I was kind of hoping maybe you could just introduce yourself, Catherine, for the clients on the call today who might not know you, and then tell me a little bit about. Let's start with the buyer. Let's start with the target. The target lead, and how do you teach your sales folks how to understand them and how to understand their motivations? Let's just kind of dip our feet in by understanding the buyer from a sales perspective.
Okay, super. So my name is Catherine Brown, and I do live in Houston, Texas. Thankfully, with technology, I am able to connect with people all over the world. It's been awesome. Just as a side note, I've been invested pretty heavily in time in Clubhouse, which is where I met Vicki and a few other people who are on who have joined us today on the webinar. But the people from all over the world are getting together to talk about these topics of sales and marketing, which is really fun. So I do specialize in business to business sales training. And one thing that is a little bit unusual about me is that I'm also a Story Brand certified guide. So anyone that's familiar with the Building a Story Brand framework will know that normally agencies and marketing professionals like Blythe are people who go through that training. I attached myself to that because I wanted more writing training, and I also wanted to connect with people that I could work with, because I believe that starting all the way at the beginning, from how people self-identify and say, oh, I think this company can help me, whether they're seeing your social post or they meet you at a trade show, or they still get a brochure, or they read an article where you're quoted, all the way to for the times they follow you and then decide initially to have that first conversation to all the way through sales process. We want those messages to be consistent. And my background, which is in enterprise consulting services and enterprise technology, that's how I was trained to sell many years ago, was with ERP technology, enterprise resource planning technology, accounting systems, call center technology, HR systems, payroll, student information systems. That was my background. There are still many, many, many companies, Blythe, that have the same divide between sales and marketing that we had all the way back in the late 90s when I was doing that work, where marketing is saying, I gave good leads, and sales, you didn't do anything with it. And sales is saying, you never give me good leads. And there's a lot of fighting, and that fighting is still going on. And so I'm looking for that cohesiveness and those connections of that message all the way through. So I'll say that just to get us started, and I know we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where Catherine, you and I are really aligned, right? I think when we first met, it's like the uneasiness of the sales and marketing message. It's like, so what are you teaching your folks, and how are you manipulating people into buying, and then using my content to spin your words? And over the course of working together, we've learned, or you've taught me, that it's not about that, right? It's about empathy, and it's about demonstrating authority, and it's about understanding what the client needs in a consultative from a consultative perspective, and then pulling that into understanding your values and how they align with the buying process. And so we've really used that at Paper Sword now, and we've had a huge amount of success with it. And so I'd love to just start there. I'd love to start with kind of understanding the buyer from a values-based perspective and what you teach there. Maybe get into a little bit about those 5 magic topics, because I think that's really important for marketers to know.
Sure, thanks. So,
Yeah.
so I'll say a couple of things. When I want to be provocative and I'm trying to get a hook with a social media post or get someone to engage or come up with a clever sales talk topic, I'll say, let's talk about all the reasons that people really buy. And so I'm going to say this to technical people in the audience here, Blythe, that there are all kinds of reasons people buy that have to do with the amazingness of your product or service, right? You have invented something. Someone invented something that is artificial intelligence, augmented intelligence, blah, 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 amazing stuff. And I'm just saying blah, blah, blah to fill in the blanks, not because it's not important, but there's all this technical stuff that is about product marketing. That's about what makes you special. But one of the things I talk about is with my tech sales background, growing up in that, and then running a lead generation business to business telemarketing firm for 17 years, about 50% of my clients. So we represented over a couple hundred tech clients over 17 years. And what we learned was that you have to very early connect with people on a little bit more of what we would say is an internal problem or motives and values kind of connection, or you sound just like any other salesperson and you're too easy to ignore. So, so an example, I know some of you have the book and some of you don't, and that's okay. I'll show you what it looks like. So it's a blue and white cover called How Good Humans Sell. And one of the things I open with in the book that I want to share with you all, because it's something you could use just right away, even today, even if you never get the book, this is something I hope will be useful to you. One of the cases I'm making, Blythe, is I say that people, the other reason people buy, or the real reason people buy, is in addition to how amazing your product or service is, it is what I call the MVP list. And that stands for the Motives and Values Power List. Now, I'm doing a play on words on purpose so you remember MVP like most valuable player, right? But the idea is I'm saying, people, just simply because they're a human being and they're an individual, they're motivated by these deep personal reasons for what it will do for them professionally to work with you. And the 3 categories I talk about are people are motivated by their comfort, by their status, and by their security. So the reason I bring that up here is because if we can have language in how we talk about how we help people from a marketing standpoint, and we reference in our case study that this company doubled their revenue when they implemented this technology, well, the person who picked that technology or the committee who picked that technology, that's going to affect their internal status because they're going to look great. Right? Because this advanced their career, because they brought you in and this made their department more effective, right? So remembering that people buy from people, humans buy from humans, and that people really, when it comes down to it, they have all the same basic fears and concerns, which is, am I safe? Are you elevating my status or not? Is this making me uncomfortable or uncomfortable? Do I think you're on my side? Those are motivators that both marketing and salespeople need to understand before they can send a proposal and before they can be certain that they're going to close. Because if that buyer doesn't think you understand these things about them at some level, that you won't really have a great connection.
Yeah. And that's also how we're able to bridge between multiple buyers in an enterprise sales and enterprise marketing engagement. So typical B2B deal, if it's larger than about $30,000 to $40,000, is going to have multiple buyers. But ultimately, they are buying to solve a business problem, right? And that business problem comes with internal drivers. If I can't solve this business problem, then I might lose my job, then I might lose my status, then my business won't be able to grow. And that's going to affect my ability to feed my family. And it's not just the CTO who feels that, it's the business analyst who feels that, it's the CMO who feels that. So we can really cross divide in our marketing messaging. And then once it boils down to sales, you can use that exact same script. So we have continuity in our messaging, right?
Yes.
Which is what you're talking about, aligning those sales and marketing messages. But it typically boils up to the business problem you're solving for.
Yeah.
And there are only, a certain number of those.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah.
I can think of another. I can think of another example of a recent client, and you and I worked with. You were in the same class when we worked together through the class, and you know some people I worked with at this company. But I have a quick another example for people about how you would think about the MVP list, if that's okay. Would that be good?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes.
So there's a company that I worked with that makes drill bits and all kinds of other oil and gas technology. And they are not Schlumberger and they are not Halliburton, which are the two names that you might know if you know anything about oil and gas. So they're not them, and basically everyone under them is like the giants and then much smaller. So they're a smaller firm. And if you have been following the markets, or you live in part of the world that does drilling, you know that the price of oil has been down for a long time. It's been really tough to be in those industries. So if a small company loses a few accounts and needs to grow, I mean, it's very impactful to lose a couple big accounts because they're really small. So I was working with a team and had the opportunity to influence both the sales and marketing side of things, because they hired me for sales training. But what I quickly realized was that we didn't want to use the scripts they'd been using. We really wanted to go all the way back to the marketing message so that we had cohesiveness. And I'll give you a quick example of what that MVP list would look like. If you sell a drill bit, you sell either to the consultant in the field, or you sell to a drilling engineer in headquarters. Those are your two buyers. And both of them, depending on the circumstances, can independently make a decision to try a new bit. But changing bits is a really big deal, and changing providers is a big deal, because the bit is relatively, I mean, it's big for you and me, but it's a relatively small piece of equipment in the giant well site. And yet it's such a big deal, because if it breaks and slows down, the whole job stops and you're losing, thousands of dollars by the minute, right? It's very impactful. So what does that tell me? That tells me security is a big deal to the drilling engineer. They do not want to screw up and pick someone that picks a bit that will break, because it's a personal threat to them professionally to look bad, because why did they take a chance on this new company, right? So we have to think from the mind of the buyer and say, why would someone be willing, would they ever be willing to go with someone who is not a household name? How can we get them to pay attention to us? And so, one of the things we did is we looked at that motives and values power list, and we said, how will they look? How will they feel? How can we make them feel more comfortable, right? What can we do to address their questions about security? So we address that before they even have to bring it up, right? So that's where we were really thinking through the words we used, and that carried all the way through how we asked about their goals and their timing and their urgency and their openness in the sales call. But it began with messaging in marketing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. One of the things that I found fascinating is how a change in the message to include internal pain, those kind of like those how you feel, how the buyer feels, how it relates to how salespeople sell. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about belief and values when it comes to selling, and how important it is to talk belief and values. I just love this bit. This really just like changed how I thought about selling. And it also really changed the marketing messaging that came along with it. So I want to make sure we talk about that. And I feel like you're like one step removed from talking about how the beliefs and values changed for this drill bit company too.
Okay. So tell me if I go the way that you're hoping. Blythe and I had a loose plan for this, so you just stop me and go, no, I want to go a different.
I know I'm going off track because
it's okay. No, I don't mind. I just want to make sure I cover what that you want. So,
but
okay.
Go.
So fundamentally, one of the things that we talk about in How Good Humans Sell is that selling is not about closing. And I say that to be a little bit provocative because obviously you have to close lots of things to have lots of revenue. But the Glengarry, Glenn Ross, The Death of a Salesman, Tommy Boy, all these references, like we joke about it, but all of those stereotypes about sales have worked their way into the lexicon. We use words like pitch, we use words like a hard close. We have certain assumptions we have about negotiation because of this. And so one of the things that I like to talk about that is very consistent with being a person who cares about those internal drivers and a client's deeper concerns with their motives and values and aligning with those, to do that, you have to, first of all, I think, Blythe, have a definition that you say a sales call, especially the first sales call, which is what I call a discovery call, we are meeting to see if you can articulate your goals, if I can understand your goals well enough to know if we should continue talking, and if I can be of service to you directly, or if I ought to give you a referral. And so first of all, selling is about making a match. It's about having alignment and a match, that I ask enough questions of you that I understand your goals and your timing and what the decision process will look like. And I can cover some other things that I always cover in qualifying with that in a little bit. But I first want to see if there is alignment and match about whether I can help you. And I don't have an assumption when we get on the phone. I don't know if I don't know you and you just filled out my lead generation form or come to the website or come to the event or come to the webinar. I don't know until we start talking if I can help you. And I don't assume I can. I ask you a series of questions. I truly care. And if I realize quickly I can't be a help, part of what I love to do as a professional is I make an introduction to someone else who's a better fit. And so in that way, this is kind of one of the themes about StoryBrand that carries through from marketing to selling, is this image of a guide. It's saying a guide always goes before the hero of the story. A guide has walked this path before. A guide knows what's going to be involved if you work with me, if you follow my path, right? And I am a strong character, but I don't push my way into your life, right? In the Lord of the Rings, Gandalf said, I want to help you, right? But he didn't have very many words. If you look at the word count of the script, Gandalf didn't talk that much compared to the other characters in the story, but he was obviously so revered in their leader and so respected and so useful as a guide, right? So you have to care, and you can't have a heavy agenda going in, because that's just not a good human thing to do. And yet with a path to follow and some questions to ask, you can be extremely effective and can know relatively quickly if you think this is work you can close. We just don't assume that's the case. So let me pause and see, where you'd like to take that.
Well, and I think you are absolutely right. One of the things that I've learned as I've built my business is that the more I focused on living my purpose and helping people build their businesses and helping people tell their stories, and I worried a heck of a lot less about selling brand engagements or selling website projects. My husband always jokes that I make my living on chit chat, but I've spent my entire life honing this skill for a very specific niche of people. And I'm going to continue to do that. And I am fortunate enough that some of those people want to do business with me. And so, but on the other hand, I'm also not afraid to ask someone for business, because I've done the work to know that the services that we offer have a legitimate impact for our clients. And the return on that investment is huge. And so I really, truly believe in what I do, and I believe in the team that I've built. I think that having that belief resonate through a marketing and sales message is really important. And where we see things falling apart is in those calls to action in the messaging. Because I see a lot of very, very weak calls to action on websites and in email funnels and through social media, right? You're selling something. You're talking about a problem that you're solving, and you've done the work to identify that it's a huge problem for your client or your potential client, but then you're not directly telling your lead that they need to do business with you.
Right.
And it's almost like a disconnect, right?
Right.
Because you're demonstrating that you believe it, but then you're not actually asking the person to solve the problem.
Yes.
And I see that in sales too, right?
Yes. Yes. Actually, I was just doing a group coaching before this, and one of my members was saying that he talked about, like, if he had the very first message he sent out to someone, he said, I think I would say, would it be interesting to you to talk about this? And I would let that be the end of my email. And I'll use that as an example here to say his goal in being a good human is to not be too pushy, is to not be too intrusive, and to say, let me know. But there's this other side of it too, which is this fine line I think we strike where, please hear me say, it's not that I don't want people to close. I want them to make lots of money following my sales training. But I think you can have a path you follow that feels very flexible experientially, because you're asking open-ended questions. You get your prospect or client, your prospect to do most of the talking because you have designed these open-ended questions, and you're learning all the things you need to know if you can help them. And then you have a very clear opportunity and call to action. So one of the things that I said to my client who said, I think I would end the email, that would end the solicitation email with saying, let me know if you'd like to, if that would be interesting to you, have a conversation, is that one of the ways we're a guide is that we want to have a super clear call to action, because we don't want to let there be space for something to get weird inside our own head. Let me explain what I mean. If I say to you, Blythe, let me know if you're interested in talking, and then I don't hear from you, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know what it means. And for real, despite my very best efforts of having the very best marketing and very best copy I could possibly have, you just might not have seen my email. And you might have seen it marked unread, and now it's on page 2 because you get so many emails, right? So what happens is, if you don't reply right away, I don't know what that means. And part of being a guide, part of this continuity about this imagery of being a guide, is that I always try to stay in control of the things that are in my control. I can't control you, but I can control me. And so I can name when I'm available, and I can say what I will do next, and I can name the action I will take, and I can control what I send you, but I can't control your response. So if I leave something dangling, that's like a dangling participle. If I leave that hanging out there by saying, let me know, and then there's no invitation that's more specific than that, I actually don't know what it means if I don't hear from them.
Totally. Yeah.
It's a common issue.
And they might, there's something inside of a person receiving that when you have a week like, oh, let me know if you want to talk, and you put it on the other person to call a time or what have you. Or what I hate the most is when somebody sends me their calendar link. I'm just like, so you're making me do the work. I hate that.
You don't see that as easy. You feel like, now I have to go look.
Yeah, now I have to look at my calendar and look at their calendar and like find the right time, but they're the one that wants to do business with me. That's kind of a pet peeve of mine.
Okay, so let me clarify, because I mean, I think there's a lot of questions because everyone's using online calendars. Do you want them to name their preferred times, or are you saying you want them to ask you for yours?
So I would say, if I wanted to schedule a meeting with you, Catherine, and I was asking for your time, I would say, can we talk early next week? I'm available Monday from this time to this time, and Tuesday from this time to this time. Now, if you're not available, at some point I can just send a calendar link, but at least I've done the work to identify, like to take the first step. That's just me.
No, I think I know that's getting into minutia, but I think people really know this. They ask me this all the time, actually.
Really?
So, yeah, it comes up all the time.
So what do you do? What do you do?
I do both. I do what you said, because I'm booked out pretty far. So I don't want someone to assume we can talk in the next few days, because unless you have, I don't know, a $50,000 project that's going to start next week, you're probably several weeks out. So unless it's such a warm lead that I know it's a slam dunk, I'm booked, I'm teaching. So I like to name the dates because I want to set expectation and have that seem reasonable. And then I will often say, if those don't work, please feel free to check this. So I'll include my calendar in it, but I'll name what works for me.
Interesting.
That's how I do it.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that we have in marketing, if I can pull it back up the funnel,
sure,
right? For us marketers, we go schedule. There's like a schedule a demo. I love that. Schedule a demo, and then it goes to a calendar page. I could watch a demo on demand by some demo monkey without needing to schedule a call. And I don't need to click schedule a demo and then pull up my calendar and you know what I mean? I just feel like sometimes there can be a little bit more interaction there. But sometimes that's what needs to happen. I see SSG's client of mine, they're on the call right now. We're working on if you have their database consultants, if you have a database emergency, call this number right now. And we started the process with a form. Fill out this form and we'll give you a call. And I was like, wait a second, if my production database is down and I can't get onto my website and I'm losing $50,000 a day, I don't want to fill out a form. I want to call a number and have somebody pick up and fix my problem. You know what I mean? So we have those thoughts of like, how can we remove friction and set clear calls to action to get buyers to interact with us in a way that aligns with our values and is not, what do you call it? Sleazy or cheesy?
Or ick.
Or icky.
Yeah, exactly. Always driving to that next step. So I had a person I was talking to just a couple days ago, and they were saying, what do you do when you sent a proposal and then you can't get back with them, to talk about it? And so that flashing yellow light to me was, okay, so this is an awesome teaching opportunity because they've really opened it up, said, how can I do this better? And so what we do is we never, ever, ever, ever send a proposal without agreement of when we will talk about it. It's a contingency of sending a proposal.
Totally. Oh my goodness.
Right.
The number of mistakes I've made there. Oh man, so much time wasted.
I only know all these things because I learned them the hard way.
Yeah, right.
But so I really had to model that. They were like, well, what do you mean? I mean, how would you say that? So it's about directing the process, and you can be a good human, be the nicest person. You've given some great suggestions on the call. You get a little consulting while you're talking, right? Like, I'm not talking about being a jerk. I think there's the idea of being a good human, super nice, super kind, very directive and very clear. They all go together, right? They're not mutually exclusive. So we've had a wonderful call, and we think this is qualified enough to send a proposal, and that's the next step. I try to avoid sending proposals when I can just do a straight out contract, because proposals are more work to read. But let's say a proposal is required. So before we send that, we say, well, since they say, well, would you go ahead? I think we're ready to move forward. Would you send me a proposal? I would say, in that case, yes, let me tell you how this typically works. I can get that to you in X time frame. And so in order for me to do that, let's go ahead and schedule now when we're going to walk through it. If I get that to you by today's Wednesday, if I get that to you by Friday morning, right now, let's schedule to talk on Monday or Tuesday and talk about what I think. And then just shut up, right? And wait and see what they say, because if they're unwilling to do that, there's a very high probability that it's a competitive situation and they just want your number. They just want your price. If they're not willing to walk through what you sent them. So you don't want to do the work of sending that to them. You have more qualifying to do, potentially, if they're unwilling to discuss this thing. Like, why should you put in that time if they're not going to put in the time? That doesn't feel good. That's not a good arrangement to go into. That's another example of being a guide. You can say, yes, here's how that typically works. And here's what I do next. And you model that. and you require that.
And so, so what happens if it's clear that they're in a, or you're in a competitive situation and they just want a number? Do you just send them an email with a number? Like,
that's such a good question. I mean, so let me just go over these with you real quick. You asked,
because now I'm curious. Now just tell me everything.
You asked me about the 5 magic topics earlier, so I covered this a little bit.
I really want to talk about that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have this. If you own the book, some of you do. It's on page 95. I talk about the 5 magic topics is what I call the 5 topics that I need to know the answer to somewhere along the line in a complex B2B sales situation. I need to know the answer, and I don't have to know it all on the same call. It can be sometimes I learned it on one call, an introductory call, and then when we showed the demo, I asked a few more things and I found out some other answers, or some of it could be handled over email. It doesn't have to be all at once. But what I'm saying is in every complex, expensive B2B product or service sale, I have to know these things. I have to know about their timing. I have to understand the level of urgency, because if they're interested in talking and going through the process with me, but it's not urgent, it's not a sales lead, it's a marketing lead. And marketing leads are awesome. I mean, that's great, right? It'd be someone that we're going to keep nurturing. That's why we have Blythe. That's why we have PaperSword. That's why we have systems. But I want to know that before I invest tons of time, because it's not urgent for you to move forward. The problem you're facing isn't urgent enough. So timing is one. Another is understanding the business goals and the person's goals. So I have goals as a topic. Another thing I must know about is we've got to talk about money. So I personally, in my very first discovery call, I share a minimum starting place based on what I think I'm going to recommend to them. I personally don't ask, what is your budget? Because this is one of the only times I will say that I think people overtly lie. People typically say less than they're actually willing to spend if they perceive enough value in what you're offering. So I just don't set them up for that. I don't ask the question that way. I say, well, it sounds like you're talking about, a starting website is X amount. And I just give a floor so they can self-select out if they can't even live with that. I don't have to know the total scope yet. I just want to vet out on minimum pricing. That's my objective. Competition is kind of getting to your question. And then Blythe, finally, I'm ending with decision-making process. That's the 5th thing. Now, this order is not important. It doesn't matter what order you find this stuff out. You just need to know all 5 of those topics. And I can list them in a chat again or read them for you again later. But we could put them in the show notes. That'd be another thing we could do. But you asked me, what would I do if I knew it were competitive? And this is where it's really important to say, how will you decide? And get them to articulate what's important to them individually and then as a group. Because if they can't tell you because they haven't decided, which is often the case in my experience, especially mid-market company and below, they don't know because they've never done this before, then you could potentially give them some advice on things they could consider, which could give you a unique advantage. Or you want to give them some coaching to help them think through that, which is another place for you to give some consulting along the way. Because if they do know the answer and they won't tell you, there's just a really good chance that someone else is the front runner. So whether you choose to send a number over and participate, I would say that's a case-by-case basis. But just because someone sends you an RFP does not mean you're obligated to respond. I think if you didn't write that thing and you don't already have a relationship with people there, it's not a probable close. It's a stretch that it's going to happen because you understand someone authors that thing. And if it wasn't you influencing and helping with that, I'm not saying you can't win. I'm just saying it's harder. So you need to look at your whole pipeline and decide what is my small staff's, most likely probable next close. And is this where we want to spend our time?
Yeah, absolutely. But I will say that I do win a lot of those.
Do you?
Because we're so niched inside of like IT services, SaaS software, and the data platform. I will be an alternative to an agency that they're looking at, and then I will just come in and be able to speak their language. And then I have kind of stolen a number of those.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And niching down, I mean, if you ever want to talk about niching down, I'm going to try to talk you into it 100% all the time, right? Yeah. Because I believe that the riches are in the niches. And I'm proof of that.
You've done really well.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, buddy. Yeah. Jason is a great marketer and works with one of our clients. And so I'm with you though. I have lost countless hours in the proposal process because I did a proposal, and the one mistake I constantly made was when a client or a lead didn't really know what they wanted. With digital marketing, there are 100 different ways to skin a cat, which is a weird saying, but it's true, right? You can get to leads, you can get to network and audience a whole bunch of different ways using different channels. Mm-hmm. And so I would say, hey, can I put together a plan for you? I'll blue sky it. So I will go as big as I know. Then we'll get on a call and we'll just kind of like make it into something that is usable. I've had, it took like 4 or 5 leads taking my plan and shopping it around before I realized that I didn't have I hadn't really qualified them. And as a marketing person sending MQLs or marketing qualified leads to sales folks, I think it's important for us to share those details, get really clear on the CRM process, mm-hmm. and what those leads have consumed before it gets sent to sales, and then having that training for them to be able to qualify their leads.
Yeah. And I think, Blythe, the other thing that, what a great marketing partner can do for you is that you don't have to verbally get all the answers to the magic topics, right? Like, we could look back at this for just a second. If you need to know decision-making process, competition, money, goals, and timing, you could talk about the investment. That could be something that they read about, learn about, see on a video, or experience before they get on a call. Some people do that, right? Like, executive coaches are great at that, by the way. Like, they have packages and you start at a certain amount and you pre-qualify yourself if you're not able to participate in that. You also can have people fill out on the purpose of the first call. You can have them start to explain about their goals. Right? You also can have different ways that you vet for timing. And so I don't want to act like, I don't want you to think for 1 second that this has to be, necessarily that I'm only talking about multi-month, multi-call things. But I have worked with a lot of SaaS companies. Some have multiple modules, so they actually have to have several people in a room for more than one demo, because they actually have so many live questions that it can't all be done in one sitting. And there are multiple steps in the process. So in those more complex situations like that, what I'm saying is, if someone is saying, hey, why don't you send me a proposal, and you don't know the answers to those 5 topics, then you want to say, it was my pleasure to send your proposal. I still have a few questions. Don't send it yet. Because there's no way, I don't care if you use Dubsado, I don't care if you use Proposify, I don't care what you use, I don't care how much it's templated. It is still less time consuming for you to ask those questions and make sure it's time to send something than it is to write up something that doesn't get purchased. So I feel like as long as it's B2B, and you could have other qualifying points too, right? For some people, there's more things too. I must know about the tech environment, or I must know about other things. What I'm saying is the 5 magic topics are the minimum that most people, they wait to talk about money till they send their proposal. Or they actually never did say, how will you decide? And it turns out that there's this whole other person who's from a different department who needs to weigh in, and you have never spoken to them, and they're rather influential. Well, that was a real misstep, right? You need to make sure that you talk to all the right people. If you don't ask, you won't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and then in marketing, we need to know about that person. So we need to market to that person, right? So that's good. That's good feedback that goes up the chain the other way.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So we've got about 15 minutes left. I see we lost a couple people, but if you guys have any questions for Catherine or myself, please go ahead, put them in the chat, or just interrupt us. I don't know. We're pretty chill. Like, we're It's not formal. Put up your hand, classroom style here.
Yeah, they may have a question that they'd like to ask.
If not, I have a question for Catherine. Because whenever I can get an hour of Catherine's time, it's like,
very kind.
Oh, okay, here we go. Okay, who, me or Catherine? Who do you want to answer that question?
Sorry, I was thinking Catherine and the company with the drill bits. You were saying opportunity. You worked on both sides, marketing and sales. And I'm just curious how you created that alignment between marketing and sales. What were some of the tactics that you used to bring them together to have one cohesive message?
Thanks for that. Yes. So there are different people that have different services of what they call it. I know that we know each other from the story brand community. So I know that many of us have some kind of strategy session that we do. Blythe, what do you all call it in your company when you are going through the external problem, internal problem, and all those questions?
Yeah, I call it a story brand, like a story brand engagement, let's say.
A story brand engagement. Okay.
Yeah.
So I have like a big generic name. I call those several hour, let's get on the same page about all of our language workshops. I call those just sales and marketing strategy workshop. So I think I need naming help to make it better, but I just call it the sales and marketing strategy workshop. But I do that on purpose because I want representation from both offices, from both departments to come. And I'm working mid-market and smaller typically. So I'm going to have a company partner, company owner. There might be a director of sales, director of marketing, or there might even be a contractor. There could be a fractional vice president of sales and a marketing employee, right? It could be any combination of contractors and employees in the room. But I want them to all hear each other talk about the value proposition and the questions I take people through if I do this at the start of an engagement, which I often do. I don't always. If they're already pretty aligned, I don't have to do this, but I will often sell that first. The other thing, Gordana, that I get to do, which has really just been a realization in the last couple of years, I confess I wasn't doing it before that, but I've been much more explicit when I do sales training to invite them to pay for their director of marketing to also attend. This has been game changing, y'all. Is this game changing? Because they are just hearing each other say things that I swear they never have discussed.
Yeah.
And it's also an awesome opportunity for me, Blythe. I really use it because I love marketing so much and I care about the messaging. And a lot of salespeople are not as invested in that. And so it's really such a chance for me to build up that person in those situations. So I can turn to them, and I do this with their permission. We'll talk about it, behind the scenes, but I'll say, when I see an opportunity for an internal project or something you can do where you can be of a help to them, I'm going to mention it, right? I'm going to bring that out. I had 2 different corporate clients this last year that did 6 months of training with me, and I got to do that. They both sent a marketing director, an internal marketing director to that meeting. And I was able different times to say, Susan, that's so cool. So when you and I were talking about some of those changes to the website, like you could use what so-and-so just said here, and you see how based on what he's saying in his calls, that would be more cohesive. You see that? And I'll just use these opportunities to bring that together because they're sitting in those classes together. What about you, Blythe? How would you answer that?
Okay, I'm going to qualify that because I think having a director of marketing involved in the sales training is perfect, but I don't think that marketers should report to sales. And so when we see smaller organizations, smaller tech companies, whether they're services or SaaS, they will start by hiring a marketing manager, marketing coordinator, and that person always reports to the VP of sales. And then things kind of fall off because that marketing person is then doing sales enablement work and is not building out the messaging structure. And often the CRO or the VP of sales, whatever they have, they're so old school in kind of like how they want to push into accounts that they're not thinking about messaging alignment. And so you start building a marketing team from the bottom up instead of hiring a director of marketing that sits at the same level and can affect a lot of that marketing messages. Do you know what I mean? I've seen that over and over and over again, just kind of fall apart. I'm actually going to take a little bit of a different approach in how I align sales and marketing, because I'm a product marketing specialist to start with. I got into branding because I love to write, but I'm an expert at positioning and pricing. That's kind of where I cut my teeth. And so when I talk to an IT services company, and I'm going to use a database management company because I have Jason on the call, and I know that business really well, I try to encourage them to have what I call the 10X rule. And this has really transformed my client sales organizations, because a lot of times when you're starting out as an IT services company or any services company, it's an hour worked is an hour paid. And you are scoping engagements custom every single time. And you kind of know, based on an environment and what your capabilities are, you understand what you can do, but it doesn't scale. And so you get to a certain size and then you have to bring on junior people and it doesn't work. And then you're starting to put lipstick on a pig, because you can't deliver what you promised because you can't get the resources. And so what I like to do is I like to get companies to think about 10Xing their services. And the database management companies have figured this out beautifully. They do something called a database health check. So first of all, they'll sell a small engagement. And let's say this engagement is $9,000, $6,000, right? We do this at Paper Sword as well. We sell a small story branded engagement where you work with me over 3 meetings, you get my expertise, and then I write your brand script. It's like, I don't know, 5 or 6 lines that helps you start understanding your business from a messaging and narrative perspective. And so when these tech companies sell these health checks, they can see what's wrong with the business. Just like I'm talking to a CEO and I'm learning about where they are and what they need. And so I'm getting paid essentially to go in and to assess a business. And then what a database management company can do is then sit down with the CTO and turn that $9,000 into a $90,000 managed service agreement. You need these things fixed. We can monitor your stuff. Here's how much it is per month. So we 10X that 9,000. And then the goal is to then turn that $90,000 into a $900,000 data warehousing project. That is a custom scope project. So instead of going from nothing to like a $50,000 little like whatever, you're 10Xing and you're growing inside of that account and adding a lot of value. And the goal is always like, I'm always like, get to that $1 million project. That's what you want, because then you're operating at a level that you want to be operating at and talking to the decision makers you know you need to be in front of. And as a marketing person, my job, once you get that health check, my job is to develop a number of funnels or a number of content pieces that help me understand the buyers in that organization. And so I'm sending the CTO information about what it's like to have data mining and machine learning inside of their, I'm thinking CMO, like machine learning inside of their CRM and their marketing automation platform. And I'm sending information to the compliance team about what it's like to be NIST compliant for manufacturers and et cetera, because I'm trying to like expand inside of those accounts. And it's my job as a marketer to do that because they're not ready to buy yet. And so you can do things inside of accounts that you can't do on LinkedIn, right? And so 10X rule, think about it.
Yeah, I don't think you talked to me about that. That's really cool.
Yeah, I really champion that inside of our consulting clients. Think outside of the hourly rate.
Oh yeah, definitely. Truly. Selling value, don't think hourly. Yeah.
How you scale. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. We have time for one last question. Anybody else?
I mean, I have a question I haven't asked you yet. So, what advice do you have for marketers who, let's say they have a sales team and there isn't a ton of alignment and the business has not done that messaging work yet? So they don't have the ability to use either a value statement or haven't done the work to get alignment on those internal pains. How is a marketing team or even just a marketing person supposed to support that sales team? What have you seen like work in terms of that alignment before all that messaging work gets done? Or is that it? Like you can't get alignment unless you're aligned on messaging. Like, what do you think? I would like insist on that messaging stuff, but
yeah, I mean, so I think like part of my wonder about your question is, are they open to that discussion? They just it's never been done, you know, so someone's new in their role, or do the salespeople, they've always been selling the same way and they think that's silly. That's sort of
or a new marketing person comes on board and they don't have a ton of authority, right? And so how do you support a sales team? How do marketing folks enable a sales team when they don't necessarily have the expertise, especially in tech, right? Like most marketers, when they come on, it takes like a decade to really onboard into what they're selling. It does.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I train copywriters for about 2 years before they can just like go and write about this stuff. So
yeah.
How
I think one of the first questions that you could ask that would be very telling and hopefully non-threatening would be that the marketer could ask of the salespeople. They could say, what are the kind of things that the prospect says to you that helps you know that person is really someone you can help? And that may sound simple, but it's not very simple because a lot of salespeople can't answer that question. They're used to doing what I say, you know, show up and throw up. So they come and they talk about the features.
Yeah.
But that's not what I ask, because I can read that on your bad website already, right? I already know the answer to that. I saw that when I interviewed. What I want to know is, what do people say to you that teaches you, what have you taught yourself to hear that when they say that, you know, oh, this is starting to fit the right kind of person, even if you haven't done persona work at all. Even if
that's so awesome. Like when the light bulb just goes on and it's like, oh, this person needs what I have, right?
What kind of words do they use? So we have a mutual friend. I'll just share this real quick. I know we're coming to the top of the hour, but we have a mutual friend. You and I have a mutual friend named Lynn Tickner, and Lynn names things. And her business names, products, services, offers. She's a naming expert. And she shared this story with me. She said that for a long time, she was describing her services different ways. But what her clients kept saying is I called you because we got as far as we could and then we felt stuck. And she said to me, and she said this in big settings, so she won't mind me saying this on the webinar. I mean, she said, I probably wouldn't have picked the word stuck because it sounds, I don't know, it's very casual, right? Like that's an interesting word to use, except that everyone who was buying from her kept saying, I got stuck. That's when I called. I got stuck. So what does she say now? She uses the word stuck. Because it's the word that people who buy from her use.
Yeah. I can see Jordana nodding. I swear to God, her and I like had this conversation earlier about finding the right words and pain points that your buyers identify.
And a lot of salespeople, they actually don't know the answer to this question because they are so busy talking, they don't listen carefully. And so I like to get at this not only through that sales and marketing strategy session, which I was talking about, which you call, you know, the story brand session. I also, sometimes you can get at the short answer by saying, what do you sell? And then you say, great. So what do you really sell?
Yeah.
What do you really sell? Because you want them to start talking about those other things, hopefully repeating back what the benefits have been that people have said to them in a sales call.
I love it. That's great advice for new marketers, for sure.
Good.
All right, guys. Well, we are out of time. I just want to thank you so much, Catherine, for making time for us. If you don't have this book, please go out and buy it. Oh my God, it's brilliant. As always.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I love to talk about this with you, and you and I are going to get to meet in person soon, which is so awesome. And so
I know.
I appreciate you.